Introduced simply as Dr. Okafor, a consultant, Amara Okoro observed the Innovate Dynamics Austin team meeting quietly from the back. Senior manager Mark Jenkins discussed project delays, sighing about confusing foreign directives, probably slowing things down. Nearby, Sarah Miller stifled a snicker. Then Brian Vance, addressing Jenkins, asked a question, subtly mimicking the cadence of Amara's Nigerian-British accent in his query. Amara's face remained impassive, but she noted everything. The disrespect, born of ignorance, had begun, its insidious creep into the room. How quickly can subtle mockery escalate in a professional setting, and what happens when the target holds all the power? Before we see how Amara responds to this disrespect, let us know where you're joining us from today in the comments. If you believe everyone deserves respect in the workplace, regardless of their accent or origin, and stand against xenophobia and microaggressions, please show support by hitting like and subscribing. Tomorrow's special episode features the moment the mask comes off and the consequences are immediate. Don't miss it. The subtle mimicry of Amara Okoro's accent by Brian Vance hung in the air for a moment, largely ignored by Mark Jenkins, who seemed focused on his own presentation, but Sarah Miller offered Vance a conspiratorial smirk. The atmosphere in the Innovate Dynamics conference room, already slightly strained by the project delays Jenkins was outlining, grew incrementally more uncomfortable, at least for Amara, still playing the role of the silent consultant, Dr. Okafor. She continued to observe, her face a mask of professional neutrality, making precise notes on her tablet. The discussion moved on, but Jenkins seemed emboldened by the apparent lack of reaction to his earlier foreign directives comment and Vance's mimicry. When Amara, seeing a clear flaw in the proposed technical solution Jenkins was outlining, offered a concise, insightful suggestion, prefaced with a polite, "Mr. Jenkins, if I may offer an alternative approach based on my analysis," Jenkins interrupted her mid-sentence. He chuckled, a condescending sound. "Well now, Dr. Okafor," he said, drawing out her assumed name, "that's certainly an interesting perspective you have there. A bit complex, perhaps. Maybe a little difficult for the team here to follow fully, with the communication differences." He gestured vaguely, letting the implication about her accent hang offensively in the air. This time, Sarah Miller didn't just snicker. She laughed outright, quickly covering her mouth as if catching herself. But the damage was done. Brian Vance smirked openly, adding his own commentary. "Yeah, Mark's right. Maybe things operate differently where you're from, Doctor. Here in the US, we tend to favor more straightforward practical solutions, less theoretical, Amara felt a familiar coldness settle deep within her. It wasn't hot anger, not anymore. Decades of navigating environments often hostile to her very presence, as a black woman, as an immigrant, as a highly educated scientist and executive in male-dominated fields, had forged a different kind of response. It was a profound disappointment mixed with a steely resolve. She had hoped this newly acquired Austin team, part of a strategic expansion for Innovate Dynamics, would reflect the inclusive, meritocratic culture she championed. Clearly, pockets of ignorance and prejudice remained, festering even within senior management. She let the silence stretch for another beat, allowing their unprofessionalism, their blatant disrespect fueled by racism and xenophobia, to fully manifest, observed by everyone else in the room, whose reactions ranged from nervous avoidance of eye contact to subtle winces of discomfort. She had seen enough. It was time to recalibrate. Slowly, deliberately, Amara Okoro stood up from her seat at the back of the room. All eyes turned towards her, expecting perhaps a defense of her suggestion, or maybe an awkward withdrawal from the conversation. But the quiet observer was gone. In her place stood someone radiating an aura of absolute, sea-level authority. Her posture straightened, her gaze sharpened, sweeping across the room before settling on Mark Jenkins. "Excuse me, Mr. Jenkins," she said. Her voice was perfectly calm, her Nigerian-British accent clear and precise, suddenly carrying an immense weight that silenced all other noise in the room. "There seems to be a significant misunderstanding here that I feel compelled to correct." Jenkins looked momentarily confused, then irritated at being interrupted again by the consultant. Look, Dr. Okafor, he started dismissively. I am not Dr. Okafor, Amara cut him off, her voice dropping slightly but gaining intensity. That name was used for observational purposes during this transition period. She paused, letting the statement register, watching the dawning confusion, and unease spread across the faces of Jenkins, Miller, and Vance. My name, she continued, her eyes locking onto Jenkins, then moving deliberately to Miller, then to Vance, is Dr. Amara Okoro. I am the founder, the chairwoman of the board, and the chief executive officer of Innovate Dynamics worldwide. Absolute deafening silence descended upon the room. Jaws literally dropped. Jenkins' face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, shocked white. Sarah Miller's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Brian Vance looked as if he might be physically ill, shrinking back in his chair. The other team members stared, stunned into immobility, frantically connecting the dots. The quiet consultant, the probing questions, the sudden authority. Amara let the silence hang for another second, ensuring the full weight of her identity and their catastrophic misjudgment landed. Then her voice turned to ice. Mr. Jenkins, she addressed him directly, your repeated disrespect, your unprofessional conduct, and your thinly veiled prejudice demonstrate a profound lack of judgment and leadership incompatible with the values and standards of this company. Ms. Miller, she shifted her gaze, your open participation and encouragement of such behavior are equally unacceptable. Mr. Vance, her eyes pinned him last. Your xenophobic remarks and mockery are grounds for immediate dismissal. Consider your employment with Innovate Dynamics terminated, effective immediately. She spoke the words with finality, leaving no room for argument or appeal. Please gather only your personal belongings. Do not access company systems. Security is on its way to escort you from the premises. She then swept her gaze across the rest of the stunned, silent room. This meeting is adjourned. I expect everyone else back in this room in precisely 1 hour for a frank discussion about corporate culture, professional respect, and the future direction of this team under new leadership. Without another word, Dr. Amara Okoro turned crisply and walked out of the conference room, leaving behind a scene of utter shock, burgeoning panic, and the wreckage of 3 careers destroyed by their own ignorant assumptions and prejudice. The moment the conference room door clicked shut behind Dr. Amara Okoro, the stunned silence erupted. A collective gasp seemed to circulate, followed by frantic, hushed whispers. Team members exchanged wide-eyed looks of disbelief, shock, and undeniable fear. Someone let out a nervous, choked laugh, then quickly stifled it. The sheer speed and finality of the CEO's judgment, delivered with such icy authority, left everyone reeling. They had witnessed a corporate execution, swift and brutal. Before the whispers could coalesce into coherent conversation, 2 uniformed security guards entered the room, their expressions professional but unyielding. They moved with quiet efficiency, addressing the 3 terminated employees directly. Mr. Jenkins, Ms. Miller, Mr. Vance, the lead guard stated calmly but firmly, we need you to gather your personal belongings from your workstations only. Please do not access any computer systems. We will escort you. The reactions of the fired trio varied dramatically. Mark Jenkins, his face still pale with shock, but now tinged with indignant rage, immediately began protesting. This is ridiculous. You can't just fire me. I demand to speak to HR. This is a complete misunderstanding. That woman Okafor or Okoro, whoever she is, she twisted everything. His voice rose, bordering on hysterical, but the guards remained impassive, blocking his path towards the internal phone. Sarah Miller simply burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't mean it, she wailed, looking pleadingly at her remaining colleagues, who quickly avoided her gaze. It was just a joke. I have a mortgage. Please tell her I'm sorry. Her pleas met stony silence from the guards. Brian Vance, after a moment of defiant glaring, seemed to realize the futility of arguing. A sullen, resentful expression settled on his face. He muttered something profane under his breath, but began slowly gathering his few personal items from the conference table, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. The security guards waited patiently, but allowed no deviation. escorting each of them individually first to their desks to retrieve minimal personal effects, under watchful eyes ensuring no company property or data was taken, and then directly towards the building's exit. The walk through the open plan office area was a humiliating ordeal, the infamous walk of shame, conducted under the shocked, averted, or sometimes coldly curious gazes of their former colleagues. Doors closed, quietly as they passed, heads bent over keyboards. The message was clear. Their association with Innovate Dynamics was severed, utterly and immediately. As soon as the fired employees were clear, the remaining team members erupted in anxious chatter. Fear was the dominant emotion. "Did you see?" Her eyes. "She fired Jenkins just like that? If she fired him for a comment, what happens if we make a mistake?" Others expressed a degree of relief, whispering comments like, "Honestly, Jenkins had it coming," or "Maybe things will actually get done now." The incident clearly exposed fault lines and anxieties within the team. Almost immediately, the phones of Mr. Chen, the Austin site's HR director, and Ms. Albright, Innovate Dynamics General Counsel, connected via video link from headquarters, began ringing insistently. Both were initially stunned by the news, but quickly shifted into crisis management mode. Protocols were activated. IT immediately revoked all system access for Jenkins, Miller, and Vance. Legal began preparing formal termination paperwork, adhering strictly to Texas employment law, anticipating wrongful termination lawsuits. HR prepared talking points for managers to address the remaining staff, emphasizing professionalism and company values while trying to quell the palpable anxiety. Shortly thereafter, Dr. Okoro summoned Chen and Albright to a secure video conference. Her demeanor was unchanged, calm, controlled, decisive. She briefly recounted the specific comments and behaviors she had personally witnessed that constituted grounds for immediate termination based on the company's zero-tolerance policy for harassment, discrimination, and unprofessional conduct. "There is no room for ambiguity here," she stated firmly. "Their behavior was unprofessional, disrespectful, and reflected biases entirely incompatible with the culture of innovation and mutual respect we are building at Innovate Dynamics. Follow termination procedures to the letter. Offer only the legally mandated minimums for severance if any are required. Document every step meticulously. I fully expect legal challenges, Ms. Albright. Ensure our defense is prepared, robust, and utilizes the meeting recording if necessary and permissible. There will be no negotiation on reinstatement. This decision is final." She listened to their reports on immediate actions taken, gave clear directives on next steps, and reiterated her expectation that the remaining team would reconvene shortly for her address on corporate values. Later that afternoon, in a noisy bar several miles away from the Innovate Dynamics campus, Mark Jenkins, Sarah Miller, and Brian Vance huddled together over beers, their initial shock now fully replaced by a potent cocktail of shared outrage, self-pity, and a burning desire for revenge. "Can you believe her?" Jenkins fumed, slamming his fist on the table. "Coming in here pretending to be some consultant, then firing us for basically nothing. A few harmless jokes. It's because we're American, that's what it is. She's got some anti-American bias." Miller, having cried herself out, now nodded furiously. "It was nothing, just office banter. She was looking for an excuse. She was so cold, so foreign. It's reverse discrimination." Vance chimed in, his earlier fear replaced by bravado. "And that accent. How are we supposed to take direction from someone we can barely understand? She set us up. This is completely unfair." They conveniently ignored their own blatant mimicry, prejudice, and unprofessionalism, instead constructing a narrative where they were the victims of an overly sensitive, power-tripping foreign CEO. Their shared sense of grievance solidified into a pact. "She hasn't heard the last of us," Jenkins declared, his eyes narrowed. "She thinks she can just waltz in here and fire us. We'll show her. We get lawyers. We sue. We go to the press. We'll make her regret ever setting foot in Austin." Miller and Vance nodded in grim agreement. The seeds of retaliation had been sown, watered by resentment and a refusal to accept responsibility. Fueled by a potent cocktail of wounded pride, misplaced indignation, and a burning desire for revenge, Mark Jenkins, Sarah Miller, and Brian Vance wasted little time in translating their vows of vengeance into action. Pooling their resources, they sought out legal representation, no, not for quiet negotiation, but for loud, aggressive litigation aimed at maximizing settlements and media attention. They found their champion in Lawrence Croft, a slick, publicity-hungry employment lawyer, notorious for taking on high-profile wrongful termination cases, often employing bare-knuckle tactics and skillfully manipulating media narratives to pressure corporations into settling, regardless of the merits of the case. Croft listened intently to their heavily skewed account of the meeting, immediately recognizing the potential for a sensational, headline-grabbing lawsuit against a foreign-born, black female CEO of a rising tech company, a narrative ripe for exploitation. Within weeks, Croft filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in Texas state court, naming both Innovate Dynamics and Dr. Amara Okoro personally as defendants. The lawsuit alleged a laundry list of claims: wrongful termination without due process, defamation of character based on Amara's stated reasons for firing them, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and most insidiously, discrimination. Croft cleverly framed the discrimination claim not based on Amara's race or gender, but alleging that Amara, as a foreign-born CEO, exhibited bias against American employees, creating a hostile work environment through unclear communication, unreasonable expectations, and demonstrating cultural insensitivity that culminated in their unfair dismissal when they innocuously questioned her directives or engaged in normal office banter. The legal filing was crafted less as a dry legal document and more as a press release, filled with inflammatory language painting Jenkins, Miller, and Vance as loyal, hard-working Americans victimized by an erratic, power-abusing immigrant CEO who couldn't handle criticism and lashed out impulsively. Simultaneously with the court filing, Croft orchestrated a strategic leak of the lawsuit and the fired employees' version of events to specific media outlets known for their sensationalist tech industry gossip or their politically charged criticism of diverse corporate leadership. Carefully selected tidbits from the lawsuit, along with anonymous quotes attributed to insiders, likely Jenkins, Miller, or Vance themselves, appeared on influential tech blogs and certain conservative news websites. The narrative they pushed was consistent and damaging. Dr. Amara Okoro, the celebrated CEO, had a hidden dark side. She was portrayed as volatile, unable to communicate clearly due to her accent, overly sensitive to harmless jokes, and prone to abusing her power, especially against American subordinates. Her elegant attire was mentioned dismissively, her background subtly questioned. The articles highlighted the injustice suffered by the 3 loyal employees who were allegedly fired simply for trying to do their jobs under confusing leadership. The aim was clear: tarnish Amara's image, sow doubt about her competence and temperament, and generate public pressure on Innovate Dynamics to settle the lawsuit quickly to avoid further negative publicity. The 1-2 punch of the lawsuit and the coordinated media leak hit Innovate Dynamics hard. The story quickly spread, generating precisely the kind of negative buzz Croft intended. Online comment sections and social media platforms became battlegrounds, with some defending Amara and condemning the likely prejudice she faced, while others readily accepted the narrative of the erratic foreign CEO, often peppering their comments with xenophobic or racist undertones. Innovate Dynamics' internal communications team scrambled to manage the crisis, issuing carefully worded statements emphasizing the company's commitment to respect and professionalism while declining to comment on active litigation. Employee morale, already shaken by the firings, took another hit as anxiety about the company's stability and leadership perception grew. The turmoil did not go unnoticed within the company's boardroom. While most board members initially expressed support for Amara's decisive action, the filing of the high-profile lawsuit and the ensuing negative press gave ammunition to those already skeptical of her leadership or strategic direction. Chief among them was David Harrison, an influential board member representing an older venture capital firm that had been an early investor. Harrison, known for his conservative approach and rumored clashes with Amara over her ambitious growth plans and focus on diversifying the workforce, saw the crisis as an opportunity. He began subtly expressing grave concerns in private conversations with the board chair and other directors. He didn't attack Amara directly, instead framing his worries around the potential financial impact of the lawsuit, the damage to the company's public image, the distraction from core business objectives, and whether Amara's handling of the initial meeting, regardless of justification, demonstrated poor executive judgment under pressure. He wasn't openly challenging her yet, but he was skillfully using the crisis instigated by Jenkins, Miller, and Vance to plant seeds of doubt about Amara Okoro's fitness to lead Innovate Dynamics. The external attack had found an opportunistic internal ally. News of the inflammatory lawsuit and the accompanying distorted media coverage reached Dr. Amara Okoro quickly. Reading the allegations, the claims of her discrimination, her supposed instability, the twisting of her words and actions, ignited not fear, but a cold, precise anger. The audacity of Jenkins, Miller, and Vance, facilitated by their opportunistic lawyer Lawrence Croft, to portray themselves as victims after their blatant display of prejudice and unprofessionalism, was staggering. Amara refused to be intimidated or bullied into a settlement. She immediately convened an urgent strategy session with Innovate Dynamics General Counsel Ms. Albright and the external litigation team brought in to handle the case. Her instructions were unequivocal. Fight this, vigorously expose the lies. We will not be pressured into rewarding bad behavior or validating false narratives. Use every legal tool at our disposal. Ms. Albright and her team began dissecting the lawsuit's claims, preparing defenses, and initiating the discovery process. As they reviewed the protocols surrounding the Austin office integration and executive observation visits, a critical piece of information, perhaps initially overlooked in the chaos, but standard for high-level or transitional meetings at Innovate Dynamics came to light. The primary conference room where the fateful meeting occurred was equipped with high-definition audio and video recording capabilities. These were typically used for archiving meetings for remote participants or internal review, operating under clear employee handbook notifications regarding potential recording in company meeting spaces. Amara confirmed she had been aware of the capability and had implicitly consented by participating in the meeting in that room. The legal team immediately secured the full, unedited recording and time-stamped logs from Innovate Dynamics' secure servers. What they saw and heard was, as Amara already knew, utterly damning for the plaintiffs. The recording captured everything: Jenkins' initial dismissive comment about foreign directives, Sarah Miller's snicker, Brian Vance's crude mimicry of Amara's accent, Jenkins' condescending interruption and joke about her accent, making her suggestion hard to follow, Miller's open laughter, Vance's xenophobic remark about how things work here in the US, all contrasted sharply with Amara's, as Dr. Okafor, calm professional demeanor and contributions prior to revealing her identity. Critically, it also captured Amara's precise, calm reveal and the specific policy-based reasons she gave for terminating each of them, citing their observed unprofessional conduct and violation of company values regarding respect and inclusion. There was no yelling, no instability, no discrimination on her part, only decisive action based on their documented behavior. The recording was the proverbial smoking gun. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, Ms. Albright filed a powerful motion for summary judgment with the Texas court, seeking immediate dismissal of the core claims in the lawsuit: wrongful termination, discrimination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The motion argued that the plaintiff's central allegations were demonstrably false, directly contradicted by the complete, unedited recording of the meeting itself. They attached certified transcripts of the key exchanges and offered to provide the full audio-video recording to the judge for private, in-camera review. The legal brief meticulously demonstrated that the terminations were based solely on the plaintiff's documented violation of established company policies regarding professional conduct, harassment, and discrimination, policies they had acknowledged receiving. It argued their claims were filed in bad faith, potentially constituting malicious prosecution. Lawrence Croft, the plaintiff's lawyer, vigorously opposed the motion, filing counter-arguments claiming the recording was inadmissible, taken out of context, or didn't fully capture the hostile atmosphere Amara had allegedly created prior to the recorded segment, a claim unsupported by any evidence. He tried procedural delays, but the weight of the recording was too significant to ignore. The judge scheduled a hearing. In court, Ms. Albright presented a clear, concise argument, referencing specific timestamps on the transcript that directly refuted the plaintiff's sworn statements in their lawsuit. Croft's attempts to discredit the recording fell flat under the judge's pointed questioning. After reviewing the key transcript excerpts and likely viewing damning portions of the recording privately, the judge issued a swift ruling from the bench. Based on the uncontroverted audio and video evidence presented, the judge declared, his tone sharp with disapproval directed at the plaintiff's side, this court finds that the plaintiff's core claims of wrongful termination, discrimination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress are fundamentally refuted by the factual record of the meeting itself. The evidence demonstrates clear grounds for termination based on unprofessional conduct. Therefore, the defendant's motion for summary judgment on these central claims is granted. While some minor procedural aspects or related smaller claims might technically remain open for further argument, the heart of the lawsuit, the multi-million-dollar allegations based on the false narrative, was decisively gutted. News of the judge's ruling and the existence of the damning recording spread quickly through legal circles and the tech media. Outlets that had initially run sensationalist headlines about the lawsuit now reported on its dismissal, highlighting the evidence that proved Jenkins, Miller, and Vance had indeed engaged in the behavior Amara cited. The public narrative shifted, dramatically once again, this time strongly in Amara's favor. She was vindicated, her decisive action validated by objective proof. It felt like a significant legal and public relations victory, a clear win against the baseless attacks. That meeting recording proved absolutely crucial in exposing the lies and shutting down the wrongful termination lawsuit. Didn't it? It's incredibly satisfying when undeniable evidence comes to light and justice prevails in court. How vital do you think objective recordings are becoming in resolving workplace disputes and ensuring accountability for misconduct? If you felt a strong sense of vindication seeing Amara's decision upheld and the false claims dismissed, thanks to the hard proof, comment number 1 below. Let's celebrate this win for truth. Please also hit that like button and subscribe, because while Amara won this major legal battle, the fight brewing within her own company's boardroom, fueled by David Harrison, is far from over. Amara Okoro has decisively defeated the wrongful termination lawsuit using incontrovertible evidence. However, board member David Harrison was already using the initial lawsuit and negative PR to question her leadership. Now that the lawsuit itself has collapsed based on proof of the fired employee's misconduct, how will Harrison react? Will this setback force him to abandon his challenge to Amara's authority, or will he merely shift tactics, perhaps finding new ways to exploit the situation or foment dissent from within Innovate Dynamics? The decisive dismissal of the wrongful termination lawsuit should have been a clear victory for Dr. Amara Okoro and a moment for Innovate Dynamics to move forward, reinforcing its stated values of respect and professionalism. While it did shut down the external legal threat from the fired employees and vindicate Amara's initial actions in the eyes of the law and much of the public internally, the situation remained complex and in some ways became even more treacherous. Board member David Harrison, far from being chastened by the lawsuit's failure, skillfully spun the outcome to further his own agenda. In discreet conversations with the board chair and other influential directors, Harrison adopted a tone of grave concern. While it's certainly a relief the company prevailed legally, he might argue, his brow furrowed with feigned worry, we cannot ignore the significant cost, financially and reputationally, this entire episode has incurred. One has to question the initial handling of the situation. Perhaps a more measured approach by Dr. Okoro could have avoided this public spectacle altogether. He deftly shifted the focus from the employee's misconduct to Amara's response, framing her decisiveness not as strong leadership, but as potentially impulsive or culturally abrasive. He subtly played on anxieties about her foreign background, suggesting her management style might be ill-suited to the nuances of American corporate culture, thereby inviting conflict. He lamented the distraction from core business goals, positioning himself as the voice of responsible, risk-averse governance concerned primarily with shareholder value. Harrison's carefully planted seeds of doubt found fertile ground among a small but significant faction within the Austin office and potentially other pockets of the company. These were individuals perhaps already resistant to Amara's change initiatives, loyal to the previously ousted Mark Jenkins, uncomfortable with a black woman immigrant in the top leadership role, or simply opportunistic employees sensing a power struggle they could exploit. Encouraged by the knowledge that a powerful board member was questioning the CEO, this internal resistance, previously latent, began to manifest in subtle but corrosive ways. Projects directly championed by Amara started encountering inexplicable roadblocks. Key data needed for strategic planning became stuck in interdepartmental reviews. Cross-functional teams essential for innovation suddenly experienced communication breakdowns. Deadlines on initiatives related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs Amara had personally prioritized following the firing incident, were repeatedly missed due to alleged resource constraints or conflicting priorities. Anonymous complaints surfaced on the company's internal feedback platform, vaguely criticizing leadership's communication style or lack of clarity, echoing Harrison's coded critiques. It wasn't overt rebellion, but a campaign of passive resistance, bureaucratic obstruction, and whispered gossip designed to undermine Amara's authority and create an impression of internal chaos under her leadership. The impact on overall company morale, particularly in the Austin office, was noticeable. While many employees remained loyal to Amara, inspired by her vision and her decisive handling of the initial incident, the undercurrent of dissent and obstruction created friction and anxiety. Productivity in certain key areas dipped slightly as teams navigated the subtle sabotage or became bogged down in the manufactured inefficiencies. The open, collaborative atmosphere Amara had strived to foster felt strained, replaced by a degree of caution and siloed communication. Anonymous employee satisfaction surveys, reviewed quarterly by the board, began to reflect this dip, showing slight increases in negative feedback regarding internal communication and leadership clarity, metrics Harrison could later weaponize. David. Harrison watched these developments with satisfaction, patiently gathering ammunition. He cultivated allies among other board members who shared his conservative business outlook or felt similarly uneasy about Amara's disruptive leadership. He meticulously documented every minor project delay, every negative anonymous employee comment, every fluctuation in departmental performance metrics, preparing to present them as evidence of systemic problems under Amara's tenure, conveniently omitting the context of his own role in fostering dissent. Finally, sensing the timing was right, believing he had sufficiently sown doubt and perhaps consolidated support, Harrison made his formal move. He submitted a written request to the chairman of the board, formally proposing an item for the agenda of the next quarterly board meeting: a comprehensive independent review of CEO Dr. Amara Okoro's leadership performance, management style, and overall strategic direction. Citing the cumulative impact of recent internal and external challenges, the perceptible decline in certain key performance indicators, and concerns regarding leadership stability, Harrison requested the board authorize the engagement of an external management consulting firm to conduct this review and report back with recommendations. It was a direct, unmistakable challenge to Amara's authority, a significant escalation in the internal power struggle, and potentially the first step towards initiating a vote of no confidence that could ultimately cost her the company she had built. The battle had moved decisively from the courtroom to the boardroom. Dr. Amara Okoro received the formal notification of David Harrison's request for a board review of her leadership, not with surprise, but with a cold, clear understanding of the battle lines being drawn. Harrison, unable to wound the company externally through the failed lawsuit, was now launching a direct internal assault, using the lingering turbulence he himself had likely encouraged as pretext. Amara knew this wasn't merely about performance metrics or leadership style, it was a power play, likely rooted in Harrison's resistance to her vision, her methods, and perhaps her very identity as a black woman immigrant leading a major American tech firm. She accepted the challenge not defensively, but offensively, preparing meticulously for the upcoming board meeting as if preparing for war. She marshaled her core team, her COO, CFO, head of strategy, and legal counsel Ms. Albright, tasking them with compiling an unassailable defense of her tenure and, simultaneously, a quiet investigation into Harrison's own conduct. Her team prepared detailed presentations showcasing Innovate Dynamics' strong performance trajectory under Amara's leadership, highlighting key product innovations, market share growth in competitive sectors, and successful international expansions, all achieved despite the recent disruptions. They specifically included metrics demonstrating the positive impact of the diversity and inclusion initiatives Amara had championed, initiatives Harrison had frequently questioned or subtly obstructed in the past, linking them to improved creativity and broader market reach. Recognizing that data alone might not sway entrenched opinions or political alliances on the board, Amara engaged in strategic, one-on-one conversations with key directors and representatives from major investment groups prior to the full board meeting. Two directors she knew supported her vision, like veteran tech executive Isabella Rossi. She presented her performance data confidently, outlined Harrison's likely angle of attack, and solidified their vocal support. To those considered neutral or potentially swayable by Harrison, she calmly provided context for the recent turmoil, subtly highlighting the external lawsuit based on proven falsehoods and hinting at internal resistance slowing certain projects, all while reaffirming her clear strategic plan and positive outlook. She didn't need to directly accuse Harrison in these private meetings. She simply laid out the facts, allowing intelligent people to draw their own conclusions about the source of the instability. Simultaneously, she tasked her internal security team and trusted external investigators with discreetly gathering concrete evidence of Harrison's pattern of behavior. They unearthed emails from Harrison to other board members over the past year, questioning Amara's strategic decisions using dismissive language. They found records of Harrison holding separate, unsanctioned meetings with division heads known to be resistant to Amara's restructuring plans. They even obtained anonymized but credible accounts from loyal mid-level managers who reported Harrison privately encouraging them to slow down or re-evaluate certain initiatives Amara was pushing. The day of the board meeting arrived. The atmosphere in the executive boardroom was thick with tension. Harrison presented his case first. As anticipated, he focused on the recent negative press, the cost of the lawsuit despite its dismissal, the slight dip in Austin office morale reflected in anonymous surveys and cherry-picked project delays, framing everything as evidence of Amara's volatile leadership, poor risk management, and failure to maintain stability. He spoke smoothly, using corporate jargon and feigned concern for shareholder value to mask his personal agenda. Then, it was Amara's turn. She stood before the board, poised and confident. She didn't begin defensively. Instead, she presented a powerful data-driven overview of Innovate Dynamics' significant achievements under her leadership. Record revenue growth, successful launches of 3 major products, expansion into 2 new international markets, increased patent filings. She directly addressed the Austin incident, referencing the court's dismissal based on evidence and framing her decisive action as necessary to uphold non-negotiable company values against harassment and prejudice. She acknowledged the recent internal challenges, but presented data showing resilience and swift recovery in most metrics. She highlighted the success of the diversity initiatives, linking them to specific innovation gains. Then, having established her strong record, Amara pivoted. However, she stated, her tone shifting, becoming more direct, it has become clear that some of the instability Mr. Harrison refers to may not be solely due to external factors or routine operational challenges. Her legal counsel distributed a confidential supplemental brief to the board members. Over the past year, Amara continued, evidence suggests a pattern of internal resistance and obstruction seemingly encouraged or at least tacitly approved by Mr. Harrison himself. She calmly presented summaries of Harrison's emails questioning her strategy without offering constructive alternatives, cited dates of his unsanctioned meetings with dissenting managers just prior to key project delays, and referenced the anonymized accounts of him discouraging progress on her initiatives. She didn't accuse him of orchestrating everything, but she laid out a clear pattern, suggesting his actions were aimed at undermining her leadership rather than supporting the company's best interests, potentially driven by disagreement with her vision, or she implied subtly, resistance to her very presence as CEO. The air crackled. Harrison sputtered denials, calling the evidence out of context, misinterpreted, a personal attack. But the data Amara had presented, combined with the now documented pattern of his behavior, and the vocal support from key board members like Isabella Rossi, who spoke up strongly for Amara's vision and performance, swayed the room. The chairman called for a vote on Harrison's motion for an external leadership review. It was defeated overwhelmingly. Immediately following that vote, Isabella Rossi introduced a new motion to formally censure Director David Harrison for actions detrimental to board cohesion and constituting interference with executive leadership. After a brief, tense discussion, that motion also passed with a strong majority. Harrison sat stunned, publicly rebuked, his power play utterly dismantled. Amara Okoro had not only defended her position, she had exposed her adversary and solidified her control. False victory too. Amara didn't just defend her record in that boardroom, she strategically exposed her internal rivals' bias and manipulative tactics, winning a crucial power struggle. It takes incredible preparation, courage, and political savvy to navigate and win such a high-stakes confrontation. Do you admire Amara's brilliant counter-offensive and her ability to turn a direct challenge into a decisive victory that solidified her leadership? If you believe strong, ethical leaders who face down internal politics and prejudice deserve our full support, comment number 1 below this video. Let's recognize that kind of strength. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because defeating a powerful board member doesn't necessarily end the war. Harrison, now publicly humiliated, and the bitter-fired employees might be plotting something far more desperate. Having decisively won the board's confidence and publicly censured her main internal adversary, David Harrison, Dr. Amara Okoro, appears to have weathered the storm and secured her position as CEO. But knowing the depths of Harrison's resentment and the lingering bitterness of Jenkins, Miller, and Vance, who lost their jobs, is the fight truly over? Could this public defeat push Harrison and the fired employees, perhaps now working together in the shadows, with even less to lose, towards even more reckless, potentially illegal, and dangerous forms of retaliation aimed at destroying not just Amara's career, but Innovate Dynamics itself? The public censure by the Innovate Dynamics board was a humiliation David Harrison had never anticipated and certainly wouldn't tolerate. His attempt to orchestrate Amara Okoro's downfall through internal politics had failed spectacularly, leaving him weakened on the board but simmering with a cold, vindictive fury. Stripped of his ability to easily manipulate the company from within, his strategy shifted towards inflicting maximum damage from the outside, aiming to cripple the company Amara led and make her position untenable through sheer chaos and external pressure. He knew exactly who to turn to: the 3 employees whose firings had inadvertently handed him his initial leverage, individuals now unemployed, bitter, and highly motivated to seek revenge: Mark Jenkins, Sarah Miller, and Brian Vance. Harrison, operating through discreet channels and likely using funds untraceable back to his primary accounts, made contact with Mark Jenkins. He offered substantial financial backing and logistical support, framing it as helping them achieve justice against the CEO who had wronged them. His real goal, however, was to weaponize their resentment. Jenkins, consumed by bitterness over his dismissal and eager for retribution, readily agreed to spearhead their counterattack, quickly bringing Miller and Vance on board. Their objective, implicitly sanctioned and funded by Harrison, was no longer just personal vindication. It was corporate sabotage and targeted harassment. Jenkins, leveraging his intimate knowledge of Innovate Dynamics' internal systems and protocols from his years as a senior manager, focused on inflicting competitive damage. He still possessed residual knowledge of certain project access points and, more critically, knew which mid-level employees might still harbor loyalty to him or harbor grievances against Amara's leadership. Through careful social engineering or by exploiting a security loophole he knew about but hadn't reported, Jenkins managed to regain temporary, unauthorized access to specific R&D servers. His target, Project Chimera, Innovate Dynamics' highly anticipated next-generation AI-driven data analytics platform, scheduled for launch in 6 months and representing years of research and hundreds of millions in investment. Jenkins copied gigabytes of confidential data, core algorithm designs, detailed technical specifications, internal market analysis, launch strategies, and even potential patent application drafts. He then meticulously packaged this stolen intellectual property and, using encrypted anonymized channels, leaked the entire package. A portion went to a notoriously aggressive tech blog known for publishing leaked corporate secrets, ensuring maximum public exposure and market disruption. Another, perhaps more complete package, allegedly found its way directly to Innovate Dynamics' primary market competitor, a company Harrison Vance himself had ties to. Simultaneously, a campaign of vicious personal harassment was unleashed against Amara Okoro, orchestrated likely by Callahan if still involved peripherally, or other operatives funded by Harrison using information possibly supplied by Jenkins or Vance. Her personal, non-work email address began receiving anonymous messages filled with vile racist, sexist, and xenophobic slurs. The messages mocked her accent, questioned her intelligence, referenced her Nigerian heritage with derogatory stereotypes, and sometimes contained veiled threats. Go back where you came from before you get hurt. People like you don't last. Long at the top. Coordinated trolling campaigns appeared on professional networking sites like LinkedIn and even on comment sections of articles remotely related to Innovate Dynamics, attacking Amara's character and competence, often using identical phrases suggesting an organized effort. Fake negative reviews began flooding employer review websites like Glassdoor, painting Innovate Dynamics as a chaotic workplace under toxic foreign leadership, specifically naming Amara and fabricating incidents of mismanagement or abuse. The attacks were relentless, personal, and designed to destabilize her psychologically, to make her feel unsafe and unwelcome even outside the corporate battlefield. The data leak exploded like a bomb within the tech industry. The tech blog published its scoop, revealing key architectural details and strategic elements of Project Chimera. Innovate Dynamics' stock price immediately tumbled on the news. Competitors scrambled to analyze the leaked data, potentially gaining years of R&D advantage. Internal panic gripped Innovate Dynamics as teams realized the extent of the breach and its catastrophic implications for their flagship product's launch and long-term market position. Amara found herself in the eye of yet another storm, this time one threatening the core value of the company itself. She had to simultaneously direct an urgent internal cybersecurity investigation to assess the damage and plug the vulnerabilities, reassure panicked investors and board members, while knowing one of them, Harrison, was likely behind it, manage the public relations nightmare, and try to salvage Project Chimera's future, all while enduring the deeply disturbing personal harassment campaign. The pressure was immense, attacking her leadership, her company's future, and her personal sense of security all at once. Harrison Vance and his disgruntled allies had failed to remove her, so now they seemed determined to burn the entire company down around her. The publication of Innovate Dynamics' confidential Project Chimera data sent immediate shockwaves through the tech industry and triggered a full-blown crisis within the company. It was an act of deliberate corporate sabotage, potentially crippling their competitive edge in the lucrative AI analytics market. Dr. Amara Okoro found herself instantly immersed in round-the-clock damage control. Emergency board meetings were convened, minus David Harrison, whose presence would have been untenable, though he likely received reports. Investors, spooked by the breach and the potential devaluation of future products, demanded constant updates and reassurances. The R&D team scrambled to assess the extent of the compromise, debating costly pivots or accelerated timelines to mitigate the damage. The PR and legal departments worked furiously to manage the media narrative, contain the fallout, and explore options for legal recourse against the blog that published the leak. Though proving malicious intent or tracing, the anonymous source was notoriously difficult. Amara led the charge, projecting an image of calm, decisive leadership for her anxious employees and stakeholders, making difficult strategic decisions under immense pressure. She authorized bringing in a top-tier external cybersecurity forensics firm, granting them sweeping access to investigate the breach, plug any remaining vulnerabilities, and identify the perpetrator. She addressed the company in an all-hands video call, acknowledging the severity of the breach, but emphasizing resilience and determination, rallying her teams to overcome the setback. Yet, beneath the composed exterior of the CEO, the relentless personal attacks continued, taking their toll. The anonymous emails arrived with sickening regularity, filled with racist and xenophobic bile, mocking her accent, questioning her right to lead, sometimes containing disturbingly specific, though unverifiable, threats. The coordinated online trolling persisted, fake reviews and negative comments popping up on various platforms, requiring constant monitoring and refutation by her communications team. The sheer volume and viciousness of it were designed to wear her down, to make her feel isolated and perpetually under attack. Even though she had decisively won the boardroom battle against David Harrison, the victory felt hollow as she endured this deeply personal, bigoted onslaught. She knew instinctively that Harrison was likely connected, funding or encouraging this harassment campaign, orchestrated by Jenkins and his cohort as another front in their war. But proving it remained elusive. Harrison was too careful, operating through cutouts and deniable channels. Confronting him again without concrete proof would look like paranoia or a personal vendetta, potentially undermining the very board support she had just solidified. This inability to directly strike back at the likely source of the personal attacks added another layer of frustrating impotence to the already immense pressure she was under. The isolation felt real, despite the loyalty of her core team. The data leak created nervousness throughout the company. Some employees, already unsettled by the previous turmoil, began quietly polishing their resumes. Even board members who had voted to support Amara now expressed heightened anxiety about the company's security and future, their support tinged with a new layer of worry. Amara found herself working longer hours than ever, immersed in crisis management, cyber investigations, investor relations, and strategic replanning for Project Chimera, all while steeling herself against the daily barrage of personal hate mail and online attacks. There were moments late at night, reviewing forensic reports or hateful emails, where the sheer weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her. The feeling of being besieged, betrayed, fighting invisible enemies on multiple fronts. The cyber forensics investigation proceeded methodically, but faced significant challenges. The attackers had used sophisticated techniques to cover their tracks, routing data through multiple compromised servers internationally, employing encryption, wiping, logs. However, after weeks of painstaking digital detective work, the external cybersecurity firm, collaborating with Amara's internal security lead Sarah Chen, found the critical clue. Deep within the exfiltration logs, obscured by layers of obfuscation, they identified the specific network access credentials used to initiate the data transfer. Those credentials belonged unequivocally to the now terminated senior manager, Mark Jenkins. This confirmed Jenkins's direct involvement in the leak itself. However, the analysts also noted something else significant: the technical sophistication of the data exfiltration methods, the specific malware used to bypass internal security protocols, and the advanced anti-forensic measures employed to erase the digital trail all pointed towards capabilities far exceeding those of a disgruntled former manager acting alone. The digital fingerprint suggested professional, external assistance, the kind of high-level corporate espionage or hacker-for-hire services that required significant funding and specialized expertise. Jenkins may have provided the access, but someone else, someone with resources and technical prowess, likely facilitated or executed the main breach and data transfer. The trail led definitively to Jenkins, but strongly hinted at a more powerful, shadowy hand guiding his actions, a hand Amara strongly suspected belonged to David Harrison. The challenge now was proving that connection. It is almost unimaginable, the sheer amount of pressure Amara is facing. A major corporate espionage crisis, relentless racist and xenophobic personal attacks, and the knowledge that a powerful enemy on her own board is likely behind it all. How does a leader even function, let alone fight back effectively when besieged so intensely from so many angles? If you are in awe of Dr. Okoro's strength and determination to keep leading and investigating, despite this overwhelming onslaught, comment number 1 below. Let's acknowledge her incredible resilience. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because discovering Jenkins' digital fingerprint, while crucial, only points towards a larger, more dangerous conspiracy that needs to be unraveled. The investigation has confirmed former manager Mark Jenkins initiated the devastating data leak, but the methods used scream professional, externally funded help likely provided by the disgraced board member David Harrison. Amara now has a direct link to Jenkins, but the sophisticated nature of the attack obscures the path back to Harrison. How can she and her investigators possibly bridge that gap? What forensic trails, financial links, or human intelligence could possibly connect the disgruntled Jenkins to the powerful Harrison and prove his role in orchestrating this corporate espionage? The confirmation that Mark Jenkins' credentials were used in the catastrophic data leak, combined with the hallmarks of sophisticated external assistance, galvanized Dr. Amara Okoro's counteroffensive. While publicly managing the fallout of the Project Chimera leak and enduring the ongoing personal harassment campaign, Amara privately directed her internal security head, Sarah Chen, her external cybersecurity consultants, the forensic accountants, and lead counsel, Ms. Albright, to pivot their investigative resources. Their primary objective now, definitively trace the operational and financial links between Mark Jenkins and potentially Sarah Miller and Brian Vance, and the external entity that facilitated the cyber attack, and, ultimately, prove David Harrison's role in funding or directing the entire operation. Given the potential for corporate espionage and the previous cyber attack targeting government systems, if applicable, or simply the severity of the IP theft, Innovate Dynamics began cooperating more formally with federal cybercrime units, sharing relevant non-privileged findings from their internal investigation to aid the official probe, creating a powerful combined effort. The investigation proceeded along multiple parallel tracks. One team focused intensely on the digital lives and recent activities of Jenkins, Miller, and Vance. Armed with appropriate legal warrants obtained based on the evidence linking Jenkins to the breach, investigators began analyzing their financial records, communication metadata, call logs, email headers, encrypted app usage patterns, and known associations since their termination. They looked for sudden influxes of unexplained cash, communication with known corporate security consultants or hacker-for-hire intermediaries, or travel patterns that seemed unusual. Jenkins, in particular, became the focal point. Had he met with anyone connected to Harrison? Had he received large payments beyond his severance? Had he used specific encrypted communication platforms favored by illicit actors? Simultaneously, the cybersecurity teams redoubled their efforts to dissect the digital residue of the attack itself. They analyzed the specific malware used, searching for unique code signatures that might link it to known hacking groups or previous corporate espionage cases. They painstakingly traced the data exfiltration path backward through layers of anonymizing proxies and compromised servers across the globe, hoping to find a weak link, a mistake made by the perpetrators that could reveal their true origin or infrastructure. They also cross-referenced the attack vector with the known vulnerabilities Jenkins might have been aware of before his termination. Forensic accountants followed the complex money trail, starting with the offshore entity used to pay the witness in the earlier wrongful termination suit, as discovered in Part 10, or a similar entity if that wasn't pursued. They looked for other unusual transactions, shell corporations, or consulting agreements linked, however tangentially, to David Harrison's known business interests or personal finances, searching for any payment that might correlate with the timing of the data leak or payments to individuals like Jenkins or known intermediaries. This involved navigating complex international financial regulations and layers of corporate secrecy, requiring specialized expertise. For weeks, the investigation yielded frustratingly little direct proof linking Harrison to Jenkins' actions. Harrison was too cautious, too insulated. Jenkins, Miller, and Vance seemed to have gone relatively quiet after their initial outburst, likely warned by Harrison or his lawyers to maintain a low profile. The digital trails were expertly obscured, the financial links deliberately convoluted. Amara felt the pressure mounting. The lack of a smoking gun connecting Harrison made confronting him again at the board level impossible, even as the company struggled with the consequences of the leak. The breakthrough, when it came, was a result of relentless digital forensics, applied to devices seized legally from Jenkins as part of the cybercrime investigation, or perhaps recovered deleted data from company servers he accessed. Deep within the fragmented, partially overwritten data sectors of a burner laptop Jenkins had used shortly after his termination, the forensic team made a stunning recovery. They managed to reconstruct several deleted encrypted email drafts and message logs from a secure communication app. The encryption was strong, but using advanced decryption techniques, possibly aided by federal resources, they unlocked fragments of conversations. These fragments, though incomplete, were damning. One draft email from Jenkins, addressed to an anonymized encrypted address later linked through metadata analysis to a known associate of Harrison, read, "Confirm package sent to TechLeak blog and secondary party, likely the competitor, awaiting agreed-upon final transfer." Another recovered message log showed Jenkins complaining about payment delays, referencing Harrison's guarantee and needing funds to cover operational security. Perhaps the most crucial fragment detailed Jenkins confirming receipt of updated Chimera technical specs from an internal contact, confirming he likely had ongoing help, and mentioning a directive to focus on data that would be most damaging to Okoro's Q4 launch plans, explicitly linking the leak to strategic corporate sabotage seemingly directed from above. This recovered digital correspondence was the critical link they needed. It didn't just prove Jenkins executed the leak. It strongly indicated coordination, financial transactions, and strategic direction tied directly back to Harrison's known interests and likely involvement. While Harrison's name might not have appeared directly in every message, the context, timing, recipient addresses linked to his network and references to his guarantee provided powerful circumstantial and likely legally actionable evidence of his role as the architect or financier of the corporate espionage conducted by Jenkins. Amara finally had the weapon she needed to confront Harrison directly and definitively. The recovered digital communications linking Mark Jenkins' data leak directly back to funding and potential direction from board member David Harrison provided Dr. Amara Okoro with the irrefutable evidence she needed. It was the linchpin, the proof that moved Harrison from a suspected internal adversary operating through coded language and plausible deniability into the realm of demonstrable conspiracy and corporate espionage against his own company. The time for reacting defensively was definitively over. Amara immediately convened a highly confidential emergency strategy session with her most trusted circle: General Counsel Ms. Albright, COO Eleanor Vance, Head of Security Sarah Chen, and Isabella Rossi, her staunchest ally on the Innovate Dynamics board. Spread across a secure conference table were the key findings. The forensic analysis confirming Jenkins's credentials initiated the breach using sophisticated external tools. The recovered encrypted message fragments detailing coordination, payment, References, Harrison's guarantee, and strategic targeting most damaging to Okoro's Q4 launch plans, and the forensic accounting reports suggesting financial links between Harrison-associated entities and Jenkins or intermediaries. The evidence painted a damning picture of betrayal and calculated sabotage orchestrated by one of their own directors. The strategy they devised was multi-pronged and decisive. First, Ms. Albright would formally compile the evidence package and present it immediately to the federal authorities, specifically the FBI Cybercrime Division and the Department of Justice. Prosecutors already investigating the broader implications of potential corporate espionage related to Project Chimera. Innovate Dynamics would pledge full cooperation, positioning the company as a victim of Harrison's and Jenkins' actions and seeking federal charges against both individuals. This step was crucial not only for legal accountability, but also to demonstrate to regulators and the market that Innovate Dynamics was proactively addressing the breach at the highest levels. Second, Amara and Isabella Rossi would discreetly present a summarized version of the most compelling evidence to a select group of influential, independent board members and key institutional investors whose support was crucial. The goal was to build an unshakable consensus for Harrison's removal before a full board confrontation, preventing him from rallying dissenting factions or attempting to muddy the waters further. Third, armed with this internal consensus and the weight of a pending federal investigation, they would formally demand the board chairman convene an emergency board meeting with a single agenda item, addressing Director David Harrison's breach of fiduciary duty and actions detrimental to the company. The private briefings with key board members occurred swiftly over the next 48 hours. Amara and Isabella Rossi presented the evidence calmly, factually, letting the recovered messages and financial links speak for themselves. The reaction was universally one of shock, disbelief quickly turning to cold fury. Directors who had perhaps harbored doubts about Amara, or who had been swayed by Harrison's earlier whispers, now saw his actions clearly as a malicious betrayal of the company they were entrusted to govern. His previous complaints about Amara's leadership were instantly recast as part of a deliberate conspiracy. Assurances of support for Harrison's immediate removal were quickly secured. Simultaneously, Ms. Albright formally delivered the evidence, packaged to the lead FBI agent and the assistant U.S. attorney overseeing the burgeoning investigation into the Project Chimera leak. The federal officials received the information grimly, confirming it aligned with their own findings and significantly strengthened the case against both Jenkins and, now critically, Harrison. They assured Ms. Albright of their intent to pursue the matter vigorously. With key board members aligned and federal investigators now possessing direct evidence implicating Harrison, the request for the emergency board meeting was formally submitted to the chairman. Faced with the gravity of the evidence presented by Amara, Rossi, and presumably other directors they had briefed, the chairman had little choice but to comply, scheduling the meeting for the earliest possible date. Notice was sent to all directors, including David Harrison, the agenda starkly citing review of potential breach of fiduciary duty by Director Harrison based on evidence related to the Project Chimera data compromise. Harrison, receiving the notice and likely learning through his own channels about the evidence now circulating and the federal involvement, found himself completely cornered. His attempts to undermine Amara had backfired catastrophically, leading investigators directly to his own doorstep. The predator had become the prey. The stage was set for a final boardroom reckoning, not to review Amara's leadership, but to address the alleged treachery of one of their own. The tension within Innovate Dynamics reached a fever pitch as everyone awaited the outcome of the emergency session that would determine Harrison's fate and signal the beginning of the end of this protracted, damaging conflict. The emergency meeting of the Innovate Dynamics Board of Directors convened under a palpable cloud of tension and gravity. The usual collegial atmosphere was replaced by strained formality and grim expressions. David Harrison sat at the polished table flanked by his personal attorney, looking unusually pale and drawn, though he attempted to project an air of defiant confidence that rang hollow. Across from him sat Dr. Amara Okoro, accompanied by Ms. Albright, Innovate's general counsel. The remaining board members, including Isabella Rossi, looked somber, having been briefed privately on the evidence that necessitated this extraordinary session. The board chairman called the meeting to order, dispensing with usual pleasantries and stating the sole grave agenda item, the review of potential breach of fiduciary duty and actions detrimental to the company by Director David Harrison. Ms. Albright was recognized to present the findings of the company's internal investigation, conducted in cooperation with external counsel and forensic experts. Calmly and methodically, Ms. Albright laid out the case, her presentation supported by digital displays showing key evidence. She detailed the irrefutable link establishing Mark Jenkins' credentials as the entry point for the Project Chimera data leak. She then presented the stunningly clear recovered encrypted communications between Jenkins and intermediaries, definitively traced back to Harrison-funded entities, messages explicitly discussing the data exfiltration, payment schedules, and Harrison's guarantee. She outlined the forensic accounting trail, connecting Harrison's obscure personal holding companies to payments made to Jenkins coinciding with the leak. Finally, she confirmed that Innovate Dynamics had provided this evidence to the FBI and Department of Justice, who now considered Harrison a subject in their ongoing federal investigation into corporate espionage related to the breach. The cumulative weight of the evidence presented was staggering, painting an undeniable picture of calculated betrayal and illegal activity orchestrated by Harrison against the very company he was sworn to serve. When given the opportunity to respond, Harrison, through his attorney, mounted a desperate, blustering defense. His lawyer argued the communications were taken out of context, that payments were for legitimate, unrelated consulting, that Jenkins acted alone as a disgruntled employee, and that Amara Okoro herself was orchestrating this entire scenario out of vindictiveness following their policy disagreements and her mishandling of the initial employee terminations. Harrison himself spoke, his voice trembling slightly with rage, accusing Amara of paranoia, of targeting him for challenging her reckless leadership, insisting the evidence was circumstantial or fabricated. But his denials crumbled under pointed questioning from previously neutral board members, now armed with the facts. They asked him to explain specific payments, specific communications detailed in the recovered logs. His answers were evasive, contradictory, further solidifying the impression of guilt. Isabella Rossi forcefully reminded the board of Harrison's documented pattern of undermining Amara long before the data leak, suggesting his actions stemmed from a fundamental inability to accept her authority and vision. After Harrison and his counsel concluded their weak defense, the chairman asked them to leave the room while the remaining board members deliberated. The discussion, according to later accounts, was brief and unanimous. Harrison's betrayal was too blatant, the evidence too compelling, the potential damage to the company too severe. The motion was made to remove David Harrison from the board of directors of Innovate Dynamics immediately for cause, citing gross breach of fiduciary duty, actions detrimental to the corporation, and potential engagement in criminal activity against the company. The vote was swift and unanimous amongst the remaining directors. Harrison was summoned back into the room and informed of the board's decision. Faced with the utter finality of his removal, the public disgrace, and the explicit threat of Innovate Dynamics pursuing aggressive legal action against him personally to recover damages, not to mention the looming federal investigation, Harrison, on the frantic advice of his lawyer, tendered his immediate resignation moments before the formal removal vote could be officially recorded, a final, futile attempt to retain a shred of dignity. He left the boardroom a broken man, his long career ending in ignominy, his future dominated by legal battles and potential criminal charges. The repercussions extended swiftly to the other antagonists, with Harrison's influence and funding gone and facing mounting evidence provided by Innovate Dynamics to federal prosecutors. Mark Jenkins, Sarah Miller, and Brian Vance were formally indicted on charges including conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and potentially wire fraud. Their futures looked grim, their brief act of prejudiced mockery having spiraled into serious federal crimes under Harrison's malevolent guidance. Within Innovate Dynamics, Amara Okoro's leadership was now undisputed, solidified by her resilience and strategic maneuvering under extreme pressure. The board expressed its full confidence, and employees, relieved the internal conflict was resolved, largely rallied behind her. However, the victory was not without significant cost. Project Chimera, while not entirely scrapped, required substantial re-engineering and a delayed launch, its initial competitive advantage significantly eroded by the leak. The company had incurred massive expenses related to the investigations, legal battles, and enhanced cybersecurity measures. Employee morale, though improving with Harrison's departure, needed careful rebuilding after months of turmoil, uncertainty, and the subtle sabotage campaigns. The incident had exposed vulnerabilities, both technical and cultural. Amara Okoro had won the war, saved her company, and vanquished her enemies, but the task of healing the organization and addressing the underlying cultural issues that allowed prejudice to fester in the first place remained a significant challenge ahead. With David Harrison ousted from the board and facing federal investigation, and Jenkins, Miller, and Vance entangled in the criminal justice system for their roles in the corporate espionage, a semblance of peace returned to Innovate Dynamics. But Dr. Amara Okoro knew that the absence of active conflict did not equate to a healthy or truly resilient organization. The entire ordeal, from the initial prejudiced mockery in the conference room to the sophisticated sabotage that followed, had exposed significant fault lines within the company culture, particularly in the recently integrated Austin office. Simply removing the primary antagonists wasn't enough. A deeper, more intentional effort was required to heal the divisions, address the underlying biases, and rebuild trust. Amara pivoted from crisis management to cultural transformation, viewing it as perhaps the most critical leadership challenge yet. She believed that Innovate Dynamics' future success depended not only on its technological innovation, but also on fostering a genuinely inclusive environment where diverse perspectives could thrive without fear of prejudice or microaggressions related to race, gender, origin, or accent. Her first major initiative was the implementation of mandatory, intensive, and ongoing workshops focused on cultural competency, recognizing and addressing implicit bias, understanding the impact of microaggressions, including accent bias, and promoting inclusive communication strategies. This went far beyond standard check-the-box HR training. Amara brought in leading external facilitators, experts in organizational psychology and diversity, equity and inclusion (DEI). The workshops were interactive, often uncomfortable, requiring participants at all levels from senior executives down to engage in honest self-reflection and difficult conversations about privilege, prejudice, and workplace dynamics. Amara herself actively participated, sharing some of her own experiences without dwelling on the recent trauma, to foster vulnerability and demonstrate top-down commitment. Recognizing that training alone wasn't sufficient, Amara took a bolder step. Twist 1. She established a permanent company-wide Innovation and Inclusion Council. This wasn't a typical advisory committee. It was empowered, cross-functional, and intentionally diverse, composed of elected representatives from all departments and levels. Crucially, Amara insisted it include not only enthusiastic advocates for DEI, but also individuals known to be more skeptical or representative of the old guard, believing genuine change required engaging with, not silencing, differing viewpoints, provided they remained respectful. The council was given a direct line to Amara and the executive team, tasked with providing candid, unvarnished feedback on company culture, policies, and strategic decisions through an inclusion lens. It became a forum for identifying systemic barriers, proposing concrete solutions, mediating conflicts respectfully, and fostering a sense of shared ownership in building a better workplace. Initial meetings were sometimes tense, but under structured facilitation and Amara's unwavering support, genuine dialogue began to emerge. One of the most surprising and initially controversial aspects of this rebuilding phase unfolded over the subsequent years involving Sarah Miller. Following her termination and the collapse of the wrongful termination lawsuit, Miller faced professional ostracization. However, unlike Jenkins and Vance, who remained consumed by bitterness and denial, Miller apparently underwent a period of intense personal reflection. Perhaps motivated by genuine remorse, the harsh reality of her actions' consequences, or simply a desire to rebuild her career, she reached out months later, not to Amara directly, but to the HR department, expressing a desire to apologize and understand the impact of her behavior. Amara, after careful consideration and consultation, agreed to a mediated conversation. Miller offered a seemingly sincere, tearful apology, acknowledging her complicity, her laughter, and the prejudice reflected in her inaction. Over the next few years, Miller actively participated in community programs focused on anti-racism, attended workshops, and sought to educate herself. Double twist. Seeing evidence of sustained effort and genuine change, Amara eventually made a remarkably unconventional decision. As Innovate Dynamics expanded its formal DEI programs, she approved offering Sarah Miller a mid-level position within that very department, specifically focused on developing training modules, addressing the kind of microaggressions and bystander complicity Miller herself had exhibited. Amara explained her reasoning to a surprised leadership team. True change requires acknowledging mistakes and believing in the capacity for growth. Miller's lived experience, if genuinely transformed, could offer a uniquely powerful perspective in educating others. It was a gamble on redemption, a testament to Amara's belief in restorative principles alongside accountability. Years later, the Innovate Dynamics headquarters buzzed with a different kind of energy. The company had not only recovered from the Project Chimera leak, launching a successful, albeit delayed revised version, but had thrived, becoming known not just for its cutting-edge technology, but for its demonstrably inclusive and collaborative culture. Amara Okoro stood at the head of a large conference table, leading a vibrant strategy session. The team around the table reflected the change she had championed, diverse in race, gender, age, background, and thought. Ideas flowed freely, debated respectfully, challenged constructively. Amara guided the discussion, her Nigerian-British accent a familiar and respected part of her leadership presence, no longer a point of novelty or derision. At one point, Sarah Miller, now a respected program director, presented an update on a successful new mentorship initiative pairing senior leaders with junior employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Her presentation was confident, insightful, her commitment evident. Amara listened, offering thoughtful feedback, a quiet sense of accomplishment settling within her. The journey had been arduous, marked by betrayal, sabotage, and profound challenges. But looking around the room, seeing the tangible results of the hard work of cultural rebuilding, Amara knew the true victory wasn't merely surviving the attacks or vanquishing her enemies. It was in fostering an environment where innovation flourished because of its diversity, where respect was non-negotiable, and where everyone felt empowered to contribute their unique voice. The scars remained, a reminder of the fight, but the foundation was stronger, more resilient, and built for a better future. Dr. Amara Okoro's experience within Innovate Dynamics offers critical lessons about the multifaceted nature of workplace bias and the arduous path toward creating truly inclusive environments. The initial mockery she endured highlights the intersectionality of prejudice. Her race, gender, and foreign accent were all weaponized, demonstrating how easily difference can be targeted by those harboring conscious or unconscious biases. It underscores that seemingly minor microaggressions or banter can often mask deeper, more toxic attitudes that undermine respect and professionalism. Amara's swift and decisive action in terminating the offending employees sends a powerful message about setting clear boundaries and enforcing zero tolerance for disrespect and discrimination. However, the story realistically portrays the intense backlash such decisive action can provoke. The subsequent wrongful termination lawsuit, smear campaign, internal sabotage, and corporate espionage illustrate the lengths disgruntled former employees and threatened internal power structures might go to retaliate. especially when prejudice is a motivating factor. It shows that confronting bias directly often requires immense courage and preparedness for significant conflict. The narrative also explores the complexities of corporate governance and internal politics. David Harrison's character exemplifies how personal ambition or resistance to change, sometimes intertwined with bias, can lead individuals in positions of power to actively undermine leadership and company well-being. Amara's eventual success hinged not only on her own resilience and evidence, like the crucial meeting recording, but also on strategically building alliances within the board and exposing her adversaries' motives. Perhaps the most compelling lesson emerges in the story's resolution. Amara recognizes that simply removing bad actors is insufficient for lasting change. Her commitment to implementing intensive cultural competency training and establishing the Inclusive Council demonstrates that building an equitable workplace requires proactive, sustained effort and a willingness to engage in difficult conversations. Furthermore, her eventual decision regarding Sarah Miller introduces the complex possibility of redemption and restorative approaches within corporate culture, suggesting that true transformation involves not just punishment, but fostering pathways for genuine growth and accountability, ultimately strengthening the organization's ethical foundation. Dr. Amara Okoro faced down prejudice targeting her race, gender, and accent, survived corporate sabotage, and ultimately chose to focus on rebuilding a more inclusive culture, even exploring the possibility of redemption for one offender. What does her journey reveal about the responsibilities of leadership in combating workplace bias? And what are your thoughts on balancing decisive action with the hard work of fostering long-term cultural change? Share your insights and reactions to Amara's approach in the comments below. We value hearing diverse perspectives on these complex issues. If you believe in creating respectful, inclusive workplaces and admire leaders who tackle bias head-on, please show your support with a like and subscribe for more stories exploring critical social and professional themes. Please also share this story if you think it could spark important conversations. Thank you for engaging with this story of leadership, resilience, and cultural transformation. May we all strive to recognize and challenge bias in our own environments and contribute to building workplaces where everyone feels valued and respected. Be well.